Hello, welcome to my 8.3 assignment. This assignment is about administering fitness tests, and I administered fitness tests on my client. So my first bit of the assignment is my client consultation and profile. So I just asked him a few questions like his name, his date of birth, his height, and his weight, and then just went through some questions like what sport do you play, what position do you play, how many minutes do you get roughly? What team do you play for? What standard do they play? How long is a typical training session? On a scale of 1 to 10, how hard are your training sessions? What would you say your best skills are in your sport? What would you say are skills that need improvement? What components of fitness would you say you are good at? What components of fitness would you say you need to improve on? And what areas of fitness do you believe you should work on? So by asking these questions, I just get a general idea of what my client needs to improve on, how much activity levels he does already, what sport he plays, and this will help me create a general profile for my client and help him out when help him out with things that he needs to improve on, um, uh, things he needs to improve on, and things that he's good at. So I plan to do 6 tests on my client, which were sit and reach test, the yo-yo test, hand grip dynamometer test, the wall toss test, and lane agility test. So the sit and reach test was flexibility. The yo-yo test was aerobic capacity or VO2 max. The hand grip dynamometer test was strength, and the wall toss test was hand-eye coordination, and the last one, the lane agility test, was obviously agility. So for sit and reach, this test involves sitting on the floor with legs stretched out straight ahead. Remove your shoes, and soles of the feet are placed flat against the box. Both knees should be locked and pressed flat to the floor with the palms facing downwards and the hands on top of each other or side by side. The subject reaches forwards along the measuring line as far as possible. Ensure that the hands remain the same level, not one reaching further forward than the other. After some practice the subject reaches out and holds the position for 1-2 seconds while the distance is recorded. So for that test, you'd need a sit and reach box. So for the yo-yo test is carried out by measuring 20 meters across and marking each end. Sorry. This 20-meter gap is where the participants of the test will be running between. To carry out the test, you need a speaker with the recording needed for the test. The recording is used to measure how far you've completed the test and how fast you need to be running between the 20-meter space. Once the first bleep sounds, you run to the other side of the measured space. Another bleep will sound by the time you should have reached the other side. This goes back and forth until the participant cannot continue any longer. So for this, you need a speaker that plays the audio, and then it's an audio with the amount of stages that the client's completed. So as the stages progress, the bleep sound gets more frequent. So the time you have to run between the 20-meter gap is shortened, and therefore the test becomes harder. So my next test was the hand grip dynamometer test. So the hand grip dynamometer is a device which requires a person to put their hand around the handle of the device and squeeze it. When squeezing the device, it takes a reading of how much force you have applied in kilograms. So you need a hand grip dynamometer test to carry this out, obviously. So when you do this test, it records the amount of pressure you've put against the handle. So the handle's got a mechanism where you squeeze it, and then the device actually reads how far you've pulled the trigger, how much force you've applied in kilograms. So the wall toss test, a marker is placed a distance from the wall. The person stands behind the line and facing the wall. The ball is thrown from one hand in an underarm action against the wall and attempted to be caught with the opposite hand. The ball is then thrown back against the wall and caught with the initial hand. The test can continue for test can continue for a nominated number of attempts, or for a set time period. By adding the constraint of a set time period, you also add the factor of working under pressure. So you need for this test tennis balls and a stopwatch to obviously record how much time they've taken. So the last test that I carried out on my client was the lane agility test. So the lane agility test is a series of cones placed in a square. Participant must move around the square as quickly as possible while being timed. They must run forwards towards the edge of the square and then sidestep to the other edge, and then backpedal down and sidestep across back to the start, where they then must do the same but in the reverse direction. Once they have completed this, the timing stops. So for this test, you need cones and a stopwatch, because you need to lay out the square that the client will run around, and then you have to record how long they take. So on my next slide, I did the park and informed consent. So I did a health screening, so I asked them a few general questions about their health. So I asked them if they had asthma, bronchitis, heart problems, chest pains, diabetes, high blood pressure, and epilepsy. This was to get a general idea of their physical health or their history of health, see if they had any problems that would prevent them from doing any of the exercises that I had laid out. So I then had to ask the client a few things to make sure he knew what he was doing. So I had to ask him that he understood what the test involved, any test that he didn't feel comfortable participating in, that he could ask questions at any time and he could pull out from any of the tests. So my next slide is reasons to defer or terminate testing. So I had a few reasons, and these are things that if I saw, I would stop the testing, or before the testing began, I wouldn't allow him to carry out the test. So extreme fatigue, obviously during testing, if a client's got extreme fatigue, it would be pointless to make them carry on, because it's evident that they can't do it. If they've got extreme fatigue for any of these tests, it's evident that they are not fit enough, or they've got a problem. So difficulty breathing, extremely high blood pressure. So if it's a test that requires a high blood pressure reading and his high blood pressure is extremely high, then the test will be stopped and he might be deferred to a hospital or deferred to a doctor, because high blood pressure is quite a serious case. Irregular heartbeat, the same goes as the high blood pressure. The client doesn't want to continue, so this links back to the informed consent, where the client has the right to stop testing if he doesn't want to continue. Cramps and pains, and then the equipment fails or breaks, where that's quite an obvious one, where if the equipment fails and breaks, it either means that the client can't continue because there's nothing to test, or the client's test results won't be recorded because the equipment has. So on to my next slide, is test justifications. So for my 6 tests, I had to justify why they are valid for my client and why he should be carrying out these tests. So at the start, I found out my client played basketball, and he played regularly and for a team. So the 6 tests I chose were based off of his sport. So my 6 tests were aerobic, the yo-yo test, lane agility test, wall toss, hand grip, vertical leap, and sit and reach. So my client wants to improve their fitness and basketball ability. Basketball is a sport which requires high aerobic capacity because you are going up and down the court in quick succession. So a yo-yo test holds high ecological validity for my client. The yo-yo test was chosen for this test because it is cheap and easy to set up, while also being able to test many individuals at the same time. It is also important to note that the participants' ability levels are not high, so a gold standard for aerobic capacity, a Wingate test of testing, would not be appropriate for these individuals. So the lane agility test, my client's main sport is basketball, which involves a lot of quick footwork. The lane agility tests hold high ecological validity for my client, as a quick change of direction tests the ability, tests his agility and translate over to what happens in basketball games. Lane agility was chosen because it requires minimal equipment while also being quick and easy to set up and participate in. The Illinois agility test is the most commonly used test for agility, but the lane agility test held more validity for my client as a lateral, backward, and forward movement closely mimics movements made in the sport of basketball. So for the wall toss test, the wall toss is used to test hand-eye coordination and the speed of this skill. Basketball involves controlling the ball with your hands, and so hand-eye coordination is key during the sport. Its illogical validity is high. The test uses minimal equipment and therefore is a good test to use on multiple people. The hand grip dynamometer test is a widely used test for strength, although it is not the gold standard of testing for strength or 1 rep max. It is suitable for the level of athlete taking and carrying out the test. It has low ecological validity as my client plays basketball and this test does not link directly to a specific skill in the sport. The vertical leap test was chosen because it holds a very high ecological value for my client as they play basketball, which involves using your vertical jump in most aspects of the sport itself. So it was important to see if he can improve this aspect of his fitness. Flexibility test was chosen because although not holding direct ecological value to any specific skills in my client's sport, it is important for the other components of fitness that my client is flexible, so he can improve his other components of fitness, such as vertical leap and his agility. So now moving on to my test data collection sheet. So as we can see, I've got my tests on the left and my results on the right. So you can see yo-yo test, he got to stage 16.8. Vertical jump, on his 3 attempts he got 45 centimetres, 48 centimetres and 49 centimetres. For the wall toss test he got 28, 35 and 23 after his 3 attempts, with a time limit of 30 seconds on each of his tests. The sit and reach test he got 24, 25.5 and 26 centimetres after 3 attempts. The hand grip dynamometer test, after 3 attempts he got 37.8 kilograms, 42.4 kilograms and 39.8 kilograms. And also after 3 attempts on the lane agility test he got 15.12 seconds, 14.83 seconds and 15.2 seconds. So now moving on to my test slides. My first test was the yo-yo test, and as we can see, my client's VO2 max was below average. My evaluation of this is after participating in the yo-yo test, my client scored a result that put him below average on the normative data. This means that he has a VO2 max that is below average. And my recommendations, this is a brief recommendation, but I'll go into it later on. My recommendations for my client is to run more and regularly. Taking 5 kilometres runs a couple of days at a moderate exertion means that his fitness will start to increase as a starting point. But I'll go more into that in the future slides. So the standing vertical jump, after 3 attempts my client scored 45 centimetres, 48 centimetres and 49 centimetres. After 3 tests, the client scored a high of 49, which means according to my normative data, he is at a high end of the average range for a male. And once again, I'll go into more detail in my recommendation, but my brief recommendation is for the vertical jump. The vertical jump is a component that is constantly being used in basketball, so I would recommend training his legs. Simple exercises such as calf raises, lunges and squats can increase leg strength and the client's vertical leap, but this is not so important because he showed a good vertical jump, and he was average. So for the wall toss test, my client, after 3 attempts, my client scored 28, 35 and 23. And as we can see, my client's higher score meant that he was above average and 1 catch away from being excellent. This was his best score, but when looking at his other scores, we see that he is in the average and poor level, so his coordination could be improved. For the lane agility test, my client scored 15.12 seconds, 0.83 seconds and 12.2 seconds. We can see that my client scored way below average for this test for his position of centre in basketball, meaning his agility needs to be improved greatly.